A millionaire was stunned during Christmas dinner when he saw his ex-girlfriend with triplets at his mother's house. Mark sat on a wooden bench beneath the shade of a sprawling tree in Central Park. He watched children running and playing, their faces glowing with innocence and joy, while parents followed them with looks of pride and affection. The scene stirred something deep within him. Despite having everything he had ever dreamed of, luxury cars, a stunning mansion, he couldn't shake the persistent feeling of loneliness. His mother's words echoed in his mind. Life isn't measured by what you own, but by the connections you build. As he observed a little boy trying to toss a ball into a hoop, he wondered if he had wasted too much time chasing material goals. From a young age, Mark had been driven. Growing up in a modest home, he had vowed to change his destiny. Through hard work and determination, he built an empire. But as he climbed the ladder of success, he left behind things that now seemed vital. One of those was Elizabeth. When a group of children ran past him, their laughter transported him back in time. He remembered how Elizabeth used to laugh at his jokes, even the silly ones. Their relationship had been a rare blend of trust and genuine love, something he hadn't felt again since. Over the years, his relentless focus on work and inability to prioritize her had pushed her away. Elizabeth had been clear about what she needed, but he always found an excuse to delay spending time with her. One day, she simply left. Mark told himself it was for the best. He believed that his career and achievements would outweigh any personal losses. But now, sitting in that park and watching parents cherish simple moments with their kids, he realized how wrong he had been. Pulling out his phone, he scrolled through his schedule. It was packed with meetings, calls, and endless commitments, yet none of it brought him any real sense of fulfillment. He slid the phone back into his pocket and looked around once more. A small girl tripped and fell nearby. Mark leaned forward to help her, but before he could, her mother rushed over, gently lifting and comforting her. The scene sent a pang through his chest. He wondered what it might be like to have a family of his own, to share moments like that. But he quickly brushed off the thought, convincing himself that it wasn't for him. He had spent too much time alone, and his life was too rigidly structured to accommodate the chaos of family life. An older man walking through the park with his dog paused briefly to greet him. Though surprised by the gesture, Mark responded with a faint smile. He wasn't used to people's spontaneity. The short interaction made him reflect on how much he had isolated himself in his bubble of luxury and work. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky with warm hues of orange and pink. Its light shimmered on the nearby lake where children tossed crumbs to the ducks. Mark rose from the bench, feeling he had lingered there long enough. While the park atmosphere gave him a moment to think, it also reminded him of what he had lost. With his hands in his pockets and his gaze distant, he slowly headed toward the exit. Passing by a balloon vendor, he paused briefly, considering buying one for no particular reason. In the end, he kept walking, his thoughts torn between the person he had worked so hard to become and the man he felt he truly was, a prisoner of his own choices. When he reached his car, he hesitated before opening the door. He caught a glimpse of his reflection in the car window. He looked polished, a tailored suit, a limited edition watch, and shoes gleaming like they were brand new. But behind that perfect exterior, he felt worn out. He got into the car and started the engine, letting its soft hum break the silence. On his way back to his mansion, images from the park lingered in his mind. He considered calling his mom, something he rarely did. She had always been his greatest supporter, even when she disagreed with his decisions. Stopping at a red light, he pulled out his phone and dialed her number. "Mark, what a surprise," she answered warmly, her voice immediately grounding him. "Hi, Mom, I just wanted to hear your voice. How are you?" he asked, unsure of what had prompted the call. "I'm fine as always, but the real question is, how are you? You sound different," she said with concern. Mark hesitated before replying. I don't know, I just feel like something's missing. I'm tired, I guess. His mum was silent for a moment before offering her wisdom. Maybe what you're missing isn't in your work or the things you own. Maybe it's time. Time to think about what truly matters. Her words stayed with him as they ended the call. When he got home, he dropped his keys and phone on the entryway table and made his way to the living room. The automatic lights illuminated a space that showcased his success, but felt devoid of life. He sat on the couch, staring at the city lights through the massive windows. His mother's words echoed in his mind. He knew she was right, but had no idea where to begin. As he watched the blinking lights of the skyscrapers, he made a quiet decision. It was time for a change. Although he didn't know exactly how, it was clear that the first step was to admit his life needed more than just work and success. Mark closed his eyes, allowing himself a rare moment of stillness. For the first time in years, he felt a faint glimmer of hope, like maybe there was something more meaningful out there for him. The next morning, Mark woke up early, but the restlessness from the night before lingered. He had spent hours tossing and turning, haunted by his mother's words and the images from the park that had stuck with him. His mansion, pristine and impeccably designed, felt emptier than ever. The echo of his own footsteps, as he made his way to the kitchen, served as a stark reminder of his solitude. He quickly brewed some coffee, sat at the marble island, and stared at his tablet, scrolling through the day's agenda. Meetings, calls, lunch with important clients, and yet another night likely ending with him getting home late. The routine that once gave him a sense of purpose now felt overwhelming and hollow. With a sigh, he closed the tablet, leaving his coffee half-finished, and headed to his office. His mind drifted to the past. He thought about simpler times before success had consumed every corner of his existence. His childhood had been modest, shaped by his mother's hard work and unwavering dedication after his father's passing. She spent long hours running a small neighborhood shop, but always managed to carve out time to listen to him and encourage his dreams. Growing up without a father figure had pushed him to become independent at an early age. Determined to spare his mother the sacrifices she had made, he promised himself he would achieve success at any cost. With that resolve, he studied hard, worked tirelessly, and eventually built a fortune from nothing. But as he climbed higher, he left behind the things and people that truly mattered. One memory haunted him most: Elizabeth. She had been the one true love of his life, but also the greatest casualty of his ambition. Elizabeth had an energy that cut through the tension of corporate life. Her laugh was infectious, and her simple human outlook on the world captivated Mark. In the early years of their relationship, Mark felt different, lighter. Elizabeth helped him see beyond the spreadsheets and deadlines, teaching him to appreciate the little things. But as his company grew, so did the demands on his time and attention. Weekends together were replaced with business trips, and romantic dinners gave way to endless meetings. One night, he could never forget. Elizabeth had planned a special dinner to celebrate their anniversary. The table was set with candles, and the scent of his favorite dish filled the room. But Mark arrived late, too consumed by an urgent work call to notice what he had lost. When he finally sat at the table, his attention was still divided between his phone and the stack of papers he had brought along. "Mark, can we just have one evening to ourselves?" Elizabeth asked, her voice a mix of frustration and sadness. "I'm sorry. It's just a tough week. I promise I'll make it up to you soon," he replied, not even glancing up from the report he was reviewing. That turned out to be one of the last meals they ever shared together. A few days later, Elizabeth packed her bags and left. There was no fight, no dramatic scene, just a short note explaining that she couldn't stay in a relationship where she always came last. At the time, Mark shrugged it off, convinced she would come back once she understood his priorities. But days turned into weeks, weeks into years. and Elizabeth never returned. Now, sitting at his office desk surrounded by piles of contracts, Mark wondered how he had let someone so important slip away. The ring of his phone snapped him out of his thoughts. It was Laura, his assistant, reminding him he had a meeting in an hour. "Thanks, Laura. I'll be there," he said, but he didn't move. Instead, he opened a desk drawer and pulled out a wooden box he had kept for years. Inside were old photographs, memories of a time when he still believed he could balance love and ambition. One photo showed him and Elizabeth on the beach, barefoot, smiling with the carefree joy of living in the moment. He traced the edges of the photo with his fingers, feeling a wave of nostalgia wash over him. He had spent so long chasing his goals that he had forgotten what it meant to truly live. Closing the box, he put it back in the drawer, but the feelings it stirred lingered. By the time he made it to the meeting, his colleagues could tell he was distracted. Although he tried to focus on the discussion, his mind kept drifting back to memories of Elizabeth and his mother's advice. When the meeting ended, he decided to cancel the rest of his day's appointments. He drove aimlessly through the city, letting his thoughts wander. He passed places that once held meaning for him, like the little cafe where he and Elizabeth used to meet before their relationship unraveled. Parking in front of the now-renovated shop, he stared at the familiar facade, hesitant to go inside for fear of confronting the memories. That night, back at his mansion, Mark decided to call his mother. Though they spoke often, he usually avoided personal topics. This time, however, he felt a need for her guidance. "Son, you sound troubled. What's on your mind?" she asked after a few minutes of casual conversation. "Mom, I'm tired. I've achieved everything I ever wanted, but I still feel like something's missing," he admitted. She paused before replying. "Mark, maybe what you're looking for isn't in business. Sometimes you have to look back to understand what you've left behind." Her words struck him with an unexpected intensity. He knew they were true, yet he also understood that facing the past wouldn't be simple. As he hung up the phone, he made a decision he hadn't dared in years, to reconnect with more than just contracts and numbers. He resolved to rebuild bonds with the people who truly mattered. The next day, Mark arrived at his mother's house on a calm afternoon. The home, modest but inviting, was adorned with small holiday decorations. Twinkling lights framed the window, and a wreath of dried flowers hung on the front door. Stepping out of the car, he caught the scent of freshly baked bread in the air, instantly transporting him back to his childhood. Although he rarely said it out loud, visiting this place always brought him comfort. His mother greeted him with a warm smile, as though no time had passed since their last meeting. She wore a white apron with faint flower stains, and her face radiated joy at having her son home. "Mark, my boy, it's so good to see you. Come in. I was making something special," she said, pulling him into a tight embrace. Mark returned the hug, a rare gesture for him, but one that felt right in the moment. They walked into the house together, and his mother led him to the kitchen, where a tray of cookies was cooling on the table. The space was cozy, filled with small touches that reflected her love for her home. They settled into the living room, where the soft crackle of the fireplace added warmth to the atmosphere. Mark's eyes wandered to the photographs on the walls, snapshots of his childhood that stirred a mix of nostalgia and longing. One picture, in particular, always drew his attention, a young version of himself holding a balloon in the park, his mother by his side. "How have you been, Mum?" he asked, breaking the silence. "Oh, I'm doing well as always. My garden is thriving this year and the neighbors have been so kind. But tell me about you, son. How are you?" she replied, pouring 2 cups of tea. Mark paused before answering, not wanting to burden her with his worries. "I've been fine, just a little tired. Work takes up most of my time, but I'm used to it," he said with a faint smile. She gave him a knowing look, but didn't press further, She understood her son well enough to know he didn't always share what he truly felt. They spent the afternoon chatting about light-hearted topics like her gardening plans and the happenings in the neighborhood. Mark found comfort in the simplicity of their conversation, a sharp contrast to the tense meetings and endless obligations of his daily life. Yet deep down, his mother sensed there was more to his visit, something he wasn't ready to talk about. As evening approached, she rose from her seat and went to the kitchen, returning with a box adorned with festive holiday designs. She handed it to Mark. "This is for you, son. It's a reminder that no matter what happens, you always have a place here." Mark opened the box and discovered a collection of cookies along with a handwritten note tucked inside. The note read, "Family will always be your greatest success." Those simple yet powerful words struck a chord in him, stirring emotions he didn't anticipate. As he carefully closed the box, his mother seized the moment to make a suggestion. "I want you to spend Christmas here this year. It's been so long since we've celebrated the holidays together, and I think it would do you good to take a break from everything for a while." Mark hesitated. He knew she had a point, but the idea of spending Christmas there also meant facing feelings he had buried for years. "I'm not sure, Mom. I've got a lot going on at the office." "Maybe next year," he offered, hoping it would suffice. But she wasn't easily swayed. "Mark, you always say that. I understand work is important to you, but life doesn't wait. If you don't make time for what really matters, one day you'll realize it's too late." Her words hit him hard. He knew she was right, even if admitting it wasn't easy. After a moment of silence, he exhaled and nodded. "All right, Mom. I'll spend Christmas with you." She smiled, a look of triumph softening her face. "I'm glad to hear that. I'm planning something special this year, and I think it's going to be a Christmas you won't forget." Mark didn't press for details, but her tone sparked his curiosity. As night fell, he said his goodbyes, promising to return soon. Driving back to his home, her words lingered in his thoughts. He knew his mother had always been his greatest supporter, even during the times he was too preoccupied to notice. Now, with her invitation to spend Christmas together, he felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. When he got home, he set the box of cookies on the kitchen counter and stared at it for a few moments. The words from the note echoed in his mind, a reminder that even though he had achieved all his dreams, something was still missing. He sank into the couch in the living room, gazing at the city lights outside the window. For the first time in a long while, he felt there might be a chance to reconnect with what truly mattered. Though he wasn't sure what Christmas with his mum would bring, he sensed it was a step in the right direction. He closed his eyes, letting the day's exhaustion melt away, but his mother's words continued to resonate. "Family will always be your greatest success." Meanwhile, across the city, Elizabeth woke early, just like every other day, to the jarring sound of her alarm clock. Morning light seeped through the worn curtains of her small apartment, brightening a simple yet tidy room. The cheerful voices of her daughters echoed from the next room, filling the space with giggles and playful shouts as they prepared for the day ahead. She jumped out of bed, threw a sweater over her pajamas, and headed straight to the kitchen to start breakfast. The rich aroma of coffee filled the room as she prepared a plate of toast for the girls. They were buzzing with energy, darting around the table while eagerly awaiting their meal. "Mom? Mom, can we go to the park after school today?" one of them asked, her smile lighting up the entire kitchen. Elizabeth grinned as she poured herself a cup of coffee. "If you finish your homework on time, we can go," she replied, gently running her fingers through one of their heads before taking a seat. While the triplets ate breakfast, Elizabeth found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed over the years. Things had taken a dramatic turn ever since she decided to leave Mark. Although she had loved him deeply, she knew staying meant continuing to feel invisible, a shadow behind his relentless ambition. She had tried to talk to him countless times, but he always seemed too busy to listen. Dinners had turned into lonely affairs, conversations into work monologues, and the love they once shared had slowly faded away. When she found out she was pregnant, she was overwhelmed with uncertainty. The thought of raising her daughters alone was terrifying, but staying and enduring Mark's indifference felt even worse. With a broken heart, she left him a note explaining her decision and walked away before she could change her mind. Elizabeth found a modest place to rebuild her life, far from the luxury and success she had shared with Mark. Over the years, she worked tirelessly to support her daughters, facing the challenges of single motherhood while staying determined to give them a better life. That morning, as she walked to work after dropping the girls off at school, Elizabeth thought about the sacrifices she had made and the secrets she had kept. She had never told Mark about their daughters, not because she wanted to hide them from him, but because she feared he wasn't ready for the responsibility. For years she told herself she had made the right choice, though the weight of that decision often haunted her. Her job at a small local boutique wasn't glamorous, but it provided the stability she needed to care for her girls. Her days were spent helping customers, organizing inventory, and dreaming of a brighter future for her family. Despite the struggles, she found joy in small moments, the hugs from her daughters at the end of the day, their laughter while they played together, and the rare, peaceful moments when she could sit and read a book. One afternoon, as her shift at the shop was ending, she received an unexpected call. It was Mark's mother. Although they had lost touch after Elizabeth left, they had always maintained a respectful relationship. Hearing her voice stirred a mix of surprise and nervousness in Elizabeth. "Elizabeth, I know this call is out of the blue, but I need to talk to you," Mark's mother said in a tone that was both kind and firm. "Of course, Mum. Is everything all right?" Elizabeth asked, unsure of what to expect. "I want to invite you to my Christmas dinner this year. I know you and Mark aren't in touch, but I think it's time to heal some wounds." Elizabeth paused, taking a moment to process the invitation. The thought of facing Mark after so many years filled her with a mix of anxiety and curiosity. "I'm not sure that's a good idea. So much has happened," she began, but Mark's mother gently interrupted. "I understand, Elizabeth, but I want you to think about it. I believe this could be an important moment for everyone." After the call ended, Elizabeth sat in silence, reflecting on the invitation. She knew facing Mark would be challenging, but deep down, she felt it might be time to confront the past she had been avoiding for so long. That evening, while having dinner with her daughters, she watched their innocent and joyful faces. She wondered what their lives might look like if they had a chance to know their father, if they could build a connection with him. Though she was scared of how Mark would react to learning the truth, she realized she couldn't keep it hidden forever. In the days that followed, Elizabeth found herself thinking more and more about the invitation. Memories of the happy times she shared with Mark resurfaced, their laughter and love before work and ambition drove them apart. She also remembered the heartbreak of his indifference, the uncertainty of raising her daughters alone, and the nights spent questioning whether she had made the right choices. After much soul-searching, she finally decided to accept the invitation. Facing Mark wouldn't be easy, but she knew she couldn't keep carrying the burden of her secret. Christmas morning, Elizabeth woke up early to prepare. She helped her daughters dress in their best outfits, explaining they were going to meet someone special. While she didn't give them all the details, she wanted them to be ready for what was coming. As she stood in front of the mirror getting herself ready, she felt a mix of nerves and resolve. She knew the night would change their lives forever, but she trusted she was making the right decision. Looking at her daughters playing in the living room, she smiled. No matter what happened, she was determined to face it for them. When it was time to leave, she held each of her daughters' hands and stepped out of the apartment. The crisp evening air wrapped around them as they walked to the car that would take them to Mark's mother's house. With every step closer, Elizabeth couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to take an unexpected turn. Mark arrived at his mother's house a little before dinner. He parked his car in the driveway and took a moment to appreciate the decoration she had put up. Strings of twinkling lights, a wreath on the door, and a snowman standing cheerfully in the front yard. As he stepped inside, he was greeted warmly by his mother, who wrapped him in a tight hug. "You're just in time. Everything is ready," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. The living room was filled with the warm glow of the fireplace, and the Christmas tree stood tall in the corner, adorned with ornaments collected over the years. Mark felt a sense of comfort he hadn't experienced in a long time. As he settled into the couch with a cup of hot cocoa, his mother busied herself in the kitchen, making last-minute preparations for dinner. Mark looked around, taking in the cozy atmosphere, but something felt different this year. There was an air of anticipation, like something significant was about to happen. The doorbell rang, pulling Mark out of his thoughts. He glanced toward the door as his mother walked quickly to answer it. From where he sat, he couldn't see who it was, but he could hear voices, a soft, familiar one that made his heart skip a beat. When his mother led the guests into the living room, Mark froze. Standing before him was Elizabeth, holding the hands of 3 small girls. His breath caught in his throat as he tried to process what he was seeing. Elizabeth looked at him, her expression a blend of nervousness and determination. "Hi, Mark," she said softly, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling in her chest. Mark stood, his gaze shifting between Elizabeth and the children. The girls stared back at him with wide, curious eyes. Something about their faces struck him, their dark hair, their bright eyes. "Who are they?" he finally asked, his voice trembling. Elizabeth took a deep breath. It was time to say the words she had rehearsed in her mind 1,000 times. "They're your daughters, Mark," she said, her voice filled with a mix of vulnerability and strength. Mark felt the ground shift beneath him. His world, carefully constructed around control and predictability, shattered in an instant. The weight of Elizabeth's words hit Mark like a wave. He stood frozen, unable to speak, his eyes fixed on the 3 girls. His daughters. Why didn't you tell me?" Mark finally managed to ask, his voice a mixture of confusion, hurt, and disbelief. Elizabeth held his gaze, her own emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "I wanted to, Mark, but at the time I didn't think you were ready. You were so focused on your work, and I didn't know how to fit into your world anymore, let alone bring children into it." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark's mind raced as he tried to process everything she had just said. His eyes shifted back to the girls, who were now whispering to each other, their curiosity about him growing with every passing moment. One of the girls, the boldest of the 3, stepped forward. She looked up at Mark with wide eyes, holding a small stuffed bunny tightly in her hands. "Are you our dad?" she asked, her voice innocent and direct. Mark crouched down to her level, his heart pounding in his chest. I think so," he replied softly, his voice breaking slightly. The little girl tilted her head, studying him intently. Then, to his surprise, she reached out and touched his face, as if trying to confirm for herself who he was. "You look like us," she said matter-of-factly, and the other 2 girls giggled behind her. Elizabeth, watching the interaction, felt tears welling in her eyes. It was a moment she had feared and hoped for in equal measure. Mark looked up at her, his expression a mixture of awe and vulnerability. "Why didn't you give me a chance to be there for them?" Elizabeth sighed, stepping closer. "It wasn't an easy decision, Mark. I was scared. Scared that they would grow up feeling like they weren't a priority in your life, the way I did toward the end of our relationship. I thought I was doing what was best for them." Mark stood slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Elizabeth, I can't change the past, but I want to make things right. I want to be a part of their lives." Elizabeth studied him, searching for sincerity in his words. She saw the raw emotion in his eyes, the regret, and the determination. "They need more than words, Mark. They need consistency. They need to know they can rely on you, she said firmly. You're right, Mark replied without hesitation. I'll do whatever it takes to prove that to you and to them. Mark's mother, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, stepped into the room with a warm smile. How about we all sit down for dinner and let these girls get to know their dad a little better? The suggestion lightened the mood, and soon everyone was gathered around the dining table. The girls sat between Mark and Elizabeth, their excitement bubbling over as they chatted about their favorite books, school projects, and dreams of visiting the zoo. Mark listened intently, marveling at their personalities. Each one was unique, one bold and curious, another quiet and observant, and the third full of boundless energy. He couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride and gratitude for the chance to be part of their lives, even if it had come later than he would have wanted. After dinner, the girls insisted on decorating the Christmas tree with Mark. They handed him ornaments, giving detailed instructions on where to place each one. As they worked together, laughter filled the house, blending with the warm glow of the fireplace and the twinkling lights on the tree. Elizabeth watched from the couch, her heart full but still cautious. She had spent so many years protecting her daughters and herself, and the walls she had built wouldn't come down easily. But seeing Mark with their daughters gave her a glimmer of hope, a chance for healing and a new beginning. As the evening grew late, the girls grew tired and began to yawn, their energy slowly fading after the excitement of the day. Mark carried the youngest to the couch, where she snuggled into a blanket, her eyes fluttering closed. The other two girls climbed into Elizabeth's lap, and she held them close, humming softly until they drifted off to sleep. Mark sat across from Elizabeth, watching the peaceful expressions on their daughters' faces. He couldn't help but marvel at how much he had missed. Quietly, he spoke, his voice low but filled with emotion. They're incredible. You've done an amazing job with them, Elizabeth. Elizabeth looked up at him, her expression soft but cautious. Thank you. But they're your daughters too, Mark. They deserve to know you, to feel like you're a part of their lives. Mark nodded. I'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. I know I've let you down before, but I'm not going to let them down. Elizabeth studied him for a moment, her defenses wavering. It's not going to be easy, Mark. Building trust takes time. They're used to it just being the four of us. You'll need to show them that you're here to stay. I will, he said without hesitation. I'm ready to take that time, Elizabeth. I just hope you'll give me a chance to prove it. For the first time that evening, Elizabeth allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could change. Over the next few days, Mark made an effort to spend as much time as possible with his daughters. He joined them for breakfast, walked them to the park, and even sat with them during craft time, attempting to follow their instructions for making paper snowflakes. Though the interactions were new and sometimes awkward, the girls warmed up to him quickly. They began calling him Daddy tentatively at first, then more confidently as the days went on. Each time he heard the word, Mark felt a surge of pride and responsibility. Elizabeth watched these moments from a distance, her heart a mix of hope and fear. She wanted to believe that Mark was committed, but years of disappointment had taught her to be cautious. One afternoon, while the girls were napping, Mark found Elizabeth in the kitchen, tidying up after lunch. He leaned against the counter, watching her for a moment before speaking. Elizabeth, I know I've hurt you in the past. I can't change what happened, but I want to make things right, not just for the girls, but for you too. She paused, her hands stilling over the dishes. Mark, this isn't about us anymore, it's about them. They're my priority. I know, he said, stepping closer, and they're mine too. But I also know that we were once a team, a family. I'd like to believe we can find a way back to that. Elizabeth turned to face him, her expression guarded. Mark, this is going to take time. It's not just about promises. It's about actions. Mark nodded. I understand. I'm here, Elizabeth, for as long as it takes. As Christmas Eve approached, the house was alive with excitement. The girls helped bake cookies with their grandmother, leaving trails of flour and giggles in their wake. Mark joined in, proving to be surprisingly adept at decorating cookies, much to the delight of his daughters. That evening, the family gathered around the fireplace to share stories and open one small gift each. Mark gave the girls matching charm bracelets, each with a tiny snowflake pendant. The girls beamed with delight, immediately fastening the bracelets around their wrists and showing them off to everyone in the room. Elizabeth watched the scene, her heart softening a little more. She saw the joy on her daughters' faces, the effort Mark was making, and the way he seemed to fit into their lives. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope that their family could heal.